Of the thousands of elementary schools in Canada, only one teaches its students how to become a god.
You're preparing for the greatest law, to become a god. And the prophets tell us, no man can become a god if he only has one wife. To be a god, he must have many wives. If you don't live it and abide it, you will be damned.
The voice belongs to the prophet of the Fundamentalist Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, no relation to the mainstream Mormon Church. For over 2 decades, the Canadian voice of this breakaway sect belonged to Winston Blackmore.
There were polygamists in the Old Testament. So I would just say that that's as good a place as any to explain the divinity of polygamy.
And if you don't live that way, what happens to you?
You'll go to hell.
God's endorsement of polygamy is the core belief of some 1,000 people living in a secluded and secretive community called Bountiful. It's tucked away in the Creston Valley, lying in the shadow of the East Kootenay Mountains of British Columbia. This peaceful valley holds some pretty sensational secrets about men who father up to 80 children with some 30 wives, about teenage girls who are forced into marriage with men old enough to be their grandfathers. It's all part of a belief that the more children a man produces, the better his chances of entering the celestial kingdom, finding salvation, and possibly becoming a god himself.
I think the negative focus on our religion as a felony is disgusting.
This 10-year-old footage provides a rare glimpse into Winston Blackmore, the longtime leader of Bountiful. He likes to preach to the converted, not talk to reporters. But after months of negotiation, Blackmore agreed to sit down with the Fifth Estate, although he was reluctant to discuss his 20-plus wives and 80 children.
Who said I have 20 wives and 80 children?
Oh, how many wives and how many children do you have then?
Well, I'm certainly not here to talk about my private life. I have agreed to say that I have more wives than one.
That's your private life? I got one husband, I'll tell you.
Well, good for you. And I hope you love him and take care of him and don't criticize him and support him and do all the things that wives should do with their husbands. And I sure would hope that you wouldn't sit around here with people and talk about your private life, because I'd scold you for doing that.
I bet you would.
Yes, I would, because I'm no more interested in that than I think that the public should be interested in mine.
So how many wives do you have?
I have enough so that I don't have to worry about anybody else's.
Mrs. Blackmore was more forthcoming. She says she is the first of 26 wives who have given Winston Blackmore 80 children.
Men are the head of the household and are very, very gifted in knowing what women should do. If a man is very good and has found favor in the eyes of the prophet, then he's given a position and more wives. And women should do what men tell them to do.
You know, I don't understand the sort of the theological application for this.
I don't either.
Because that's for men to know and women to obey. This polygamist rule book, called Purity in the New and Everlasting Covenant of Marriage, lays out the doctrine on which they base their religion. It explains plural marriage is a sacred ordinance designed to take a man into the eternal worlds and exalt him and make a god out of him. It is all based on God's command to Adam to go forward and multiply. Well, this group takes it literally. They believe the practice of polygamy is a holy law that stands above and beyond any human law. 46-year-old Jane Blackmore was born into this, to believe the only way she would get to heaven is if some man invited her. So subservience, compliance, and dependence were the rule.
expected that I would be a very obedient girl and do what my parents wanted me to do, and grew up and marry whom I was appointed to marry and be a mother.
Did you ever waver in that? Ever?
No, I didn't.
Being a polygamist has never been easy. Much righteous scorn was heaped on them as far back as 1890, when the official Mormon church banned the practice, threatening excommunication. Authorities would round them up and throw them in jail. So the renegades fled, some to Colorado City on the Utah-Arizona border, and some to Cardston, Alberta. But in time, their polygamous lifestyle began to disappear, so the real diehards decided to pack up and venture even farther west, trying to keep one step ahead of the law. By that time, Ottawa had declared polygamy a criminal offense, and it was that legislation that made this isolated corner of the Creston Valley, away from prying and judgmental eyes, so appealing.
British Columbia was a perfect place right there close to the border. You can get lost and you can do whatever you want to do, really, and people aren't going to ask questions.
Debbie Palmer spent 34 years in Bountiful.
It was particularly important for Bountiful to be a safe haven for polygamists that were training to become eligible to go to the highest degree of glory of the celestial kingdom, to become gods and goddesses, so they could live this sacred law of plural and celestial marriage and be unbothered by the rest of the world.
Debbie Palmer and Jane Blackmore are sisters from a prominent family. Their father, Dalman Oler, who helped found Bountiful back in 1947, had 6 wives and 47 children. Debbie, Jane, and the other girls were expected to be demure, unobtrusive, and obedient, especially in front of Daddy.
Because I love you, Daddy of mine, I love you so. I love you so.
On this wall over here is a picture of all 45 of my children. These are the latest photographs that we have.
He would father 2 more before he died in 1998. Remembering all their names was tough, so children born in a certain year were all given names beginning with the same letter.
And these are the T's. We had 4 boys and a little girl. They were born in one year. And this is the A series.
His eldest daughter, Debbie, was only 15 when her father gave her away to become wife number 6 to a 57-year-old man. You were stepmother to how many children?
To 32 children.
And you were 15?
Yes, I was. Most of his children were older than I was.
But a 15-year-old girl, even if you were a fervent believer, this is a 57-year-old man, it's got to be scary.
If that's all you've ever known, and you see girls that age being married to men that age and older all the time, it's really not that difficult of a stretch of the imagination.
It's time to have a snack. Yum! We love it so. It's time to have a snack.
There are 36 children in this kindergarten class. 7 are Ohlers, 6 Palmers, and there are 22 Blackmores. Bloodlines in Bountiful intersect. A lot. That's the danger of any closed society, ending up in the shallow end of the gene pool.
We'll eat a helpful treat.
This is where Bountiful comes looking for new blood. The head office of their religion, just north of the Grand Canyon in Colorado City. 10,000 people living in polygamy. Children here are taught outsiders are evil and that women are the servants of men. That's the reason Craig Chatwin believes this is a cult and why he got out 11 years ago.
Girls raised in this cult, and there's just an enormous amount. They have no comprehension of an outside world. It bothers me that that males here with authority, use their authority to leverage sexual favors from young girls. And that's essentially what they're doing. They take young wives, these older men, they're using their authority positions to gain access to young females. And they do it by the hordes. The brethren here in top positions have 50 plus wives. Unbelievable.
It also seems unbelievable to Ron Barton, who is with the Utah State Attorney General's office. A seasoned cop, he was surprised at what he found while investigating child abuse and incest in some polygamous communities.
If a man, an older man, seduces a 13-year-old girl, he doesn't commit, in his own mind, he doesn't commit sexual abuse on that girl. Once he's successful in having intercourse with her, then in his own mind he views himself as married.
If no one comes forward to complain, Barton has no case.
If it's not bothering anybody, why don't we all just mind our own business?
Well, and that's been the attitude for many years in Utah, and I think in other states where fundamentalists live, is that this is a victimless crime. They're not bothering anybody, nobody is being injured, and that's simply not true. We establish laws to protect young women, and we can't have a second standard for girls that grow up in Colorado City, a lesser standard, and say that's fair.
Craig Chatwin worries about his sisters. He left the polygamous community behind when he was 19, but he fears they are trapped.
And Cecilia, Nicaea. Bountiful ended up being particularly interesting to me because that's where the majority of my sisters were married. I'm from a rather large family. I have about 30 brothers and sisters, 32. And the majority of those live in Canada now. They've all been married up there. And that's about 11 or 12 sisters, all shipped up there.
2 of Chatwin's sisters married the same man, Winston Blackmore, who bristles at any questions about his 26 wives or his religion.
I'm just a guy who wants to mind his own business and raise his family, and I have a nice family, by the way. And I do love my ladies, by the way, and I love my children.
You see polygamy as a divine institution. This is what I would like to understand. Why is polygamy a divine institution?
Maybe I should ask you a question. Do you believe in the Old Testament, or do you think that it is a divine writing? You can't say that you can take the Bible if you're any kind of a religious person at all. That you can take the Bible and read the Old Testament and come out of there with a feeling that there's absolutely nothing divine about the principle of people having more wives than one.
This brings you closer to God?
Well, it is a very important part of our faith and belief.
In the last 10 years, traffic has been heavy on the road to Bountiful. Colorado City has provided Blackmore's community with a lot of ladies, nearly doubling its population. It's also raised alarm bells for the Canadian immigration officers on the Idaho-BC border because there were a lot of visitors coming in and a whole lot less going back. Carol Anderson has turned some of these American girls away. She knew where they were headed and why.
I've refused admission to them because I didn't think they were visitors. I've refused admission because I felt they were coming here to get married. There is no class under Canada's immigration law by which they can be sponsored in as a plural spouse. The law prohibits it.
But this is very interesting. Under the Immigration Act, it's illegal to have multiple wives, but nobody's prosecuting anyone in Canada for polygamy.
It's a very interesting position, and that's one that I feel the government is going to have to deal with.
So far, it hasn't. In fact, 9 years ago, 3 Colorado City girls living in Bountiful were denied immigrant status. They appealed to Ottawa on humanitarian grounds, and they won. They're now landed immigrants entitled to all benefits, including social assistance, health care, and a child tax credit. When we return, family life in Bountiful.
It's all about sex. It really is.
We are not talking about our private life. That's pornography. I wouldn't ask you how you organize your sex life.
This is Bountiful, a community nestled in an idyllic corner of southeastern British Columbia on the Idaho border, where folks marry and procreate with religious zeal, where polygamy is next to godliness.
I don't think you could begin to understand.
Jane Blackmore has 7 children and 4 grandchildren, and she has shared her husband, Winston Blackmore, with 25 other women.
Why is it so hard to approach some understanding?
Well, before you can understand, you have to basically be born into the community and be taught that way of life.
Jane Blackmore was not only born into it, she lived it dutifully for over 2 decades as the first of Winston Blackmore's 26 wives. This former bishop was the most powerful man in Bountiful. He decided who should marry whom and who deserved to have more wives than the next guy.
I'm trying to understand polygamy.
Oh, well, okay. Then why do you think that I should be able to make you understand polygamy?
Because you were the bishop for almost 20 years. You were
20 plus.
20
years.
plus. Well, so I'm asking the right person these sorts of questions.
Oh, you think you are?
Why are you laughing?
I'm laughing because I think that it would be there's absolutely no way in the world that I could explain that to you.
Please try.
I don't think that there's one bit of sense in me trying to explain a whole bunch of tenets of our religion to a bunch of people who are not interested in them.
It's really about secrecy, about keeping sweet. That's the polygamist motto that is prominently displayed everywhere for everyone to see. To keep sweet is to be obedient and to be quiet. By the time she was 34, Debbie Palmer could not keep quiet anymore about what she says is multiple marriage masquerading as religion.
Is life in Bountiful about sex or salvation?
It's all about sex. It really is, and there's a great pretense that it's a very moral, sort of back to basics, family fundamentalist type of communities, but there's sex everywhere.
What are the logistics of intercourse? How does it work? Does somebody keep a big chart and say, "Oh, Betty, you're ovulating Thursday's your night"?
I know in the larger families they do that. They have
Really?
to. Yes, they have to, because it's like, I mean, in a good sized dairy, you have to know when a cow's going to come around so that she can be serviced properly by the bull, or you don't have calves, and you don't have your cows freshened properly. And if you've got very many wives in your family, then somebody needs to keep track of that.
The statistics of Palmer's life are a little overwhelming. 6 mothers, 46 siblings, 3 husbands, 8 children, 86 stepchildren, one of whom is Winston Blackmore.
I was a stepmother. Several of his sisters were married to my father, so he was an uncle to me. I ended up being a step-grandmother to him as well, and one of the really horrific things about some of the inbreeding that has happened in the polygamous communities is that most of the men that have been in positions of control that have instigated these marriages are men that have studied breeding stock in animals.
This is all based on animal husbandry?
Yes, it is.
Debbie Palmer has committed a cardinal sin, breaking a vow of silence and going public with allegations of incest and abuse. That has made her a traitor in Winston Blackmore's eyes.
Debbie Palmer has been taking mental treatments. And if you were to look, you would find out that wasn't a whole bunch unkind, because that's what she has been doing. But I'm going to tell you this.
But she said the source of all her mental anguish is Bountiful.
Well, I would certainly disagree with that. But Debbie Palmer is whatever she is. You know what? I'm not going to sit here and criticize her. I wish her well. And in everything that she's basically doing, but, you know, I hope that someday she can find some peace.
Driving through Bountiful is like a journey back in time. What is most noticeable is the number of young pregnant girls with toddlers in tow. Most Bountiful brides are married in the eyes of their religion, but not under the law. A law which says children under 16 need not only their parents' permission, but a judge's signature. And when it comes to sex, a child between 12 and 14 may have intercourse, but their partner must be less than 2 years older.
How come in your community old men marry young girls?
There's not very many people that are much older than I am in our community.
But they do get married at 14 and 15.
There's been nobody getting married at 14 to my knowledge.
You can tell me this seriously?
Yes, I can.
Really?
That I know of. There has been at 15, but they have to have their parents' consent and they have to have a reason, you know.
15 is kind of young, don't you think?
Oh, I certainly do think it is. So, I think it's kind of young.
Do you discourage girls as young as 15?
I discourage them from doing that. Yes, I do.
What is the youngest that you know of a girl getting married?
14.
You know, when I spoke to Winston Blackmore, I asked him about that, young girls 14, 15 getting married, and I asked him if he discourages it, and he said yes, actively. He wasn't telling me the truth?
Not in all instances, no. That's not the truth.
When did you start questioning?
I've always had questions. Well, I'll tell you one small story. Just since I have been a midwife, I have a very close relationship with a lot of women from the community. And there was this 15-year-old girl who was married, and she became pregnant just very, very soon after she was married. And she was crying. She didn't want to be married. She didn't want to be pregnant. She was 15. This girl's mother was married to Winston. She's not Winston's daughter. And I said, Winston, weren't you supposed to be this girl's parent? Like, this girl mother is married to you. Like, aren't you supposed to be her parent? I said, how come? How come she was married? She was 15. And he said, well, Mother, I want you to mind your business because you are not the bishop. And I said, this is my business. These girls come to me and I deal with it. So I said, I think this is my business, and I don't think these girls should be married.
When a girl is married at 15 and becomes pregnant, it's unlikely she will be going to her high school graduation. Anyway, the school in Bountiful only goes up to grade 10. Even so, BC taxpayers fund this independent school with approximately $700,000 every year. The chief administrator is Winston Blackmore.
I would like my children to stop at grade 10, have an opportunity to go work for a little while, and if they want to go back to school, they'll go back as a mature student who will get something out of high school. And instead of just a playtime.
But even grade 10, there are only, 2 or 3 people who have graduated from grade 10.
Well, that's their business, not mine. That's their family's business, not mine, and I don't keep track of that.
I don't share that opinion at all. I have 6 children out in the workforce, and at least 4 of those 6, they cried when they had to quit school. They wanted to go to school.
Depriving children of an education is something Carol Anderson condemns. Remember, she's the government employee we met earlier. As an immigration officer, Anderson wants to stop girls from getting into Bountiful. As a part-time teacher, she sees education as their only way out.
It makes me uncomfortable to talk with members of the community who have no education, who might have grade 1 or grade 2, and we're talking adults, ones with grade 7. They don't have an education. That makes me nervous, because if you do decide you no longer want to practice polygamy, or you no longer want to be in that community, what are your options? Is that Lair, this one with the ringlets?
Yep, she came out and stayed a lot at the ranch because she was so
Carol
sick.
Anderson is grateful her mother Aloha got her and most of her siblings out of Bountiful 35 years ago. They left behind dozens of half-sisters and brothers, including a young Winston Blackmore. One day, many years later, Blackmore surprised his sister. He understood if his wives had some skills, they could earn some cash, so he asked Carol if she would teach some of them.
It's an interesting irony.
I'm his sister.
Does he also see you as a subversive sister? The subversive sister you are?
I define subversive.
You want to change what's going on in his backyard, but you want to do it your way.
I want to give his people, not just his wives, my family, the people I love, an education. But what they choose to do with it, that's their business. Language is all about communication, and if I can communicate clearly, then I've been successful with language. And somebody give me a topic sentence.
There are many types of cakes.
Okay, that would
So
be
every day, some of Blackmore's women come to Carol's class to learn to read and write and listen to some ideas they have never heard before.
Come on, Marcia, spit it out. Opening sentence.
He's a smart man. He sees what you're doing.
He's as smart as I am. He must know the risks. He knows the risks of educating people.
And the benefits. As a midwife, Jane Blackmore brings in well over $100,000 a year, all because Winston Blackmore decided the community needed a midwife and she would be it. She became so successful that now women throughout the valley seek her services. When we come back, polygamy, politics, and power.
We all have a right to freely live, so long as we honor the code of decency, which allows that everybody mind their own business.
The Fifth Estate will return.
This is the annual Battle of Britain parade making its way down Canyon Street in Creston, British Columbia. No polygamous progeny here, even though the community is just a few miles down the road. The fundamentalists of Bountiful keep pretty much to themselves. But families do come into town to stock up on groceries for the week, and a few take in a hockey game at the local arena.
They have been around so long and contributed so much to the economy of the place that the folks of the Creston Valley have pretty much come to accept the polygamists of Bountiful as just part of the landscape. Mr. Mayor, how uncomfortable is it for you to have a band of polygamists in your backyard?
It's not. They contribute to our community. They run businesses. They purchase supplies, they purchase equipment, they purchase services in their town. It's like any other individual.
Former Mayor Don Lieben says most of the 5,000 people in town feel the same.
People, I think, have adopted the live and let live attitude. You don't interfere with my pursuit of happiness, I won't interfere with yours.
That's pretty much John Kettle's take on the situation. This transplanted Texan is a local politician who also runs the city dump.
Well, you know, there's rumors here about everybody. Let me tell you something. This is what I do think. If that were a Sikh community, if that were a Chinese community, a Native community or a homosexual community, you and I wouldn't be having this conversation. You know, I'm not a Bible thumper, and I'm not a very good Christian. I drink, smoke, and I will drink kokanee beer brewed here in Creston, by the way, every week. But I'll tell you what, they live their religion, and I respect that. I hope more people do. You're going to have a hard time finding anybody in this valley that knows them that will say anything derogatory about them because they're good people.
And they are a big part of what keeps Creston on the map. They represent votes and cash, according to someone who has a foot in both camps, Carol Anderson.
Bountiful generates a lot of money. They have a big crew, they have a big business, and that money doesn't stay in Bountiful. It goes into the community. When Walmart in Cranbrook opened, every female in that community was there. And they spent a lot of money.
Like any other church, this fundamentalist sect owns a lot of property. It is managed in the United States through a private trust called the United Effort Plan, which controls assets worth more than $200 million US. Their Canadian branch in Bountiful is valued at just under $4 million. The United Effort Plan's sole Canadian trustee is Winston Blackmore, who has accumulated considerable personal wealth outside the church. The Fifth Estate has tracked Blackmore's business interests in British Columbia, Alberta, and Idaho. Everything from grain and cattle farming to forestry and transportation. He'll even rent you a biffy and a jiffy. Winston Blackmore's estimated worth is more than $15 million. But as with everything else, he keeps his business to himself.
Why are your businesses privately owned? Because I thought it's all for the church.
Well, I owe half the national debt. So before I can do anything with my property, I need to get it paid off, don't I?
But why is it owned? Why do you own it privately?
Because I started it as a business.
Blackmore's wealth and wives are no problem for his neighbors in Creston because, says Sister Carol, money talks.
They are a major economic force, and if you're in a capitalistic society that the bottom line is business, the bottom line is don't bother Bountiful because they are good business.
The only bother Bountiful ever really got was back in 1990, when some women who had fled the sect demanded an investigation. They wanted to know why Canada was turning a blind eye when the criminal code says any kind of marriage or conjugal union with more than one person at the same time is a criminal offense, with a penalty of 5 years in jail. The Creston RCMP did launch an investigation.
421 16th Avenue South.
Copy, Creston. I'll be en route.
Sergeant Randy Cook.
And the investigation confirmed, yeah, they're polygamous?
I don't know that there was any denial of that fact in the initial investigation.
Why isn't that enough for you to go in there and make arrests?
The only thing I can answer to that question is that there was an investigation conducted by the RCMP in this area. The evidence was gathered and it was forwarded to the Attorney General's ministry.
So the RCMP recommended charges in 1991, but the BC government did not approve them. They were afraid that they could lose a challenge under the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. British Columbia's Attorney General is Jeff Plant.
Your job is to enforce the criminal code. Polygamy is against the law. Why do you choose to exempt the polygamous colony of Bountiful?
Well, I don't choose to exempt them. I think that polygamy per se, practiced between and among adults, may actually raise some issues around what our Constitution says in terms of the vigorous way it protects religious freedom.
As it now stands, it appears the people in Bountiful really don't have to answer to any authority but their own.
Well, I wouldn't say that, but I also wouldn't underestimate the complexity of the issue. And I think that in the long run, the system of justice will not be well served if we pursue something that fails.
There is that whole issue of law, but there's also an issue of justice.
I think that's a good argument, and certainly is kind of another way of putting the sense of duty I feel towards making sure that we do try to advance this thing towards some measure of resolution one way or the other.
Winston Blackmore is ready to do battle with the law. His sword is his religion, his shield is the charter.
Same charter that protects the gay and the lesbian community, and the same one that protects common law relationships, and the same one that protects unfaithful husbands, and the same one that protects unfaithful wives.
Blackmore's marriages are celestial, not legal, so technically he says he's not really a polygamist, just an adulterer.
Polygamy, by the definition of it, is to have two relationships going at the same time. And there are far more people than we are that do that. I know there are.
But the tenet of your religion is that polygamy is a divine institution. You endorse it, you live it, you admit to it. So I don't understand.
Well,
I don't understand how having a lot of wives is religious freedom.
Well, do you understand the Charter's allowance for free association?
Yes.
Then you certainly ought to be able to understand the Charter's allowance for freedom of religion. And you certainly ought to be able to understand that we all have a right to freely live, so long as we honor the code of decency, which allows that everybody mind their own business.
So far, everyone seems to be doing just that, minding their own business. There is no investigation going on at the moment because the RCMP says it has no appetite to lay charges if BC's Attorney General does not have the will to prosecute. But the law seems pretty straightforward. Polygamy is a crime the federal government wants prosecuted. In fact, a Department of Justice briefing note dated October '93 says there are limits to religious freedom, especially if religious practice comes into conflict with the law. It also says Ottawa is ready to help British Columbia in any charter defense. So it is up to BC's Attorney General to uphold that law.
These days, polygamists aren't as worried about breaking the law as they are about the breakup of their church. The death of the supreme ruler, polygamist prophet Rulon T. Jeffs, left a vacuum at the top. 5,000 mourners gathered in Colorado City last September to say goodbye to the 93-year-old mouthpiece of God. Rulon Jeffs left an estimated 60 wives and 90 children, but no one to take his place. A grab for power set polygamist against polygamist until Warren Jeffs, the dead prophet's son, announced he was the new prophet. Not everyone is happy, and there is talk of a splinter group making tracks for Bountiful B.C. to rally round their man, Winston Blackmore. But his wife, Jane, won't be one of them. She no longer wants to be one of 26 wives. She no longer cares about helping her husband become a god. Jane Blackmore is leaving Bountiful.
I don't want to be part of it. And I have a 9-year-old girl who is very intelligent, and I don't want her to be married when she's 15 or 16 or 17. I want her to go to school and be the scientist that she dreams about being.
You pride yourself on being a strong woman?
Well, I'm often not a strong woman.
What is making you so unhappy now? So sad?
I'm not really sad, I'm just emotional. There's a lot of years of emotion here.